I've hinted to this in previous videos, but I really wanted to make one video that talks about how mindfulness actually works. What's going on in the brain that makes a mindfulness practice, and specifically a regular mindfulness practice, so beneficial and have these positive, lasting effects. In my experience working with clients, understanding the how and the why of therapeutic techniques is so pivotal to actually seeing progress towards the well-being and those goals that they want to have. Therapy in general truly is a process, and it's kind of an intangible process that comes with a lot of hard work. And if you don't know what's going on, why things are actually working, it makes it really hard to continually have the motivation, the energy, the drive to actually engage in some of these practices that could be so beneficial to overall well-being and seeing those lasting changes. But again, if you don't really know the why of how these things are happening, then it's really easy to say, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to go through the trouble. Which is also why in my own therapy practice, I spent a lot of time and energy doing some research and just doing a lot of learning about what's going on in the brain and in the body to create this lasting change, so I can pass this information along to hopefully help in trusting this process. So if you have any interest in learning the why and how specifically of mindfulness and how it can be such a beneficial asset to your life and towards, the goals that you may have towards your well-being, then stay tuned. As I've talked about in other videos, the core attribute of mindfulness is intentionally focusing on the present moment and continually refocusing our attention, as the mind will wander off to other topics, thoughts, memories. And this practice of focusing our attention, kind of honing that in, is actually how pathways, those neural pathways in the brain, are created. In the psychology and the counseling world, you might often hear the saying, neurons that fire together wire together. And what this is basically saying is that the more that we think something or engage in an activity, that pathway gets stronger. And when that pathway gets stronger, it tends to produce more of the same effect. And kind of think about it like weightlifting. The more times we lift in a way to strengthen a certain muscle, those muscles tend to be strengthened, and then you have more strength going forward to continually build on. Another way you might think about it is what you reap, you sow. And as mindfulness at its core is focused attention and repetition of focused attention, it's naturally building those new pathways. It's just cultivating this process of making new neural pathways in the brain. So building on this concept of neurons that fire together, wire together, one of the key components when we're talking about mindfulness and the brain is called the left prefrontal cortex. Research has shown that when we engage in pleasant activities or pleasant thoughts, the left prefrontal cortex lights up. And when it lights up, it's more active and it's actually cultivating these positive feelings. What I mean by that is basically when we're engaging in pleasant activities, pleasant thoughts, those feel-good things, it kind of says, hey, we really like that. I want more of it. And so it's gonna make it more accessible, a little bit easier to find and feel those good things and those good feelings more so in the future in daily life. So for instance, when we practice mindfulness or do a meditation, it feels pretty good. And so the left prefrontal cortex lights up, says, hey, this feels really good. We're gonna make more of this going into the future. So it's easier to access those really good feelings, those calm feelings, so to speak. Another key component in the brain that is associated with lasting change is called the anterior cingulate cortex. This area of the brain is associated with self-regulation. And what I mean by self-regulation is basically feeling more in control of ourselves, our thoughts, our behaviors, our emotions. Now, if we can have more control over our thoughts, our behaviors, and our emotions, that would hugely impact our well-being, would it not? It would impact our relationships, our ability to manage really difficult emotions. It would just help us to feel more in control in general, which really helps us to meet our goals, get rid of bad habits, improve relationships, change behaviors if we want to do that, so we can feel and think and act more in alignment with who we see ourselves to be. Not only does this part of the brain just deal with self-regulation, but it's also associated with dealing with or managing uncertainty and also learning from past experiences. And studies have actually shown that this area of the brain is more active in individuals who regularly practice meditation in particular. The next part of the brain that I wanted to talk about is called the hippocampus. Now, this part of the brain is associated with emotion and memory. It's part of our limbic system. And studies have shown that this part of the brain actually increases in gray matter. It gets bigger in those who have a regular mindfulness practice or meditation practice. Not only that, but brain scans also show that chronic stress, such as in PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or even in depression, that chronic stress tends to deteriorate the hippocampus, so it gets smaller. That shows that there's actual brain changes going on. These different parts of the brain actually change in structure and size depending on what happens in our life. Now, another really important key part of the brain is called the amygdala. Now, this is our fear center of the brain. It's also a very primitive part of the brain, which means it kind of gets jumpy pretty easily. And if you've ever experienced panic or the really uncomfortable sensations that come along with anxiety, you have your amygdala to thank. And studies have shown that 8 weeks of a regular practice of mindfulness decreases the activation of the amygdala, of our fear center. Now that means that in general, if the amygdala is less active, we tend to feel and experience less anxiety. I will likely go into more depth when it comes to the amygdala in particular in future videos when we talk more about anxiety and learning about anxiety and managing anxiety, all of those good things. But for the purposes of this video, I'll kind of just leave it at that. A regular mindfulness practice decreases activation in the amygdala and therefore we feel less anxiety. Okay, so to summarize, mindfulness is an incredibly powerful practice. Not only does it tend to feel really good when we're practicing it, we kind of get the hang of what a mindfulness practice even is. We tend to feel calm and all of those good things, but it also actually physically changes the structures in our brain in size, in their capacity, in their ability to cultivate more good feelings. There's so many positive changes that come when we practice mindfulness on a regular basis. And we tend to feel better, we tend to feel more in control of ourselves and our life. Now, of course, there are always new studies coming out, more research to be done, and I am definitely not claiming to know everything there is about the brain itself because it's so very complex. But these are just a few, studies, research facts, those types of things to hopefully help just bolster the confidence that you can have in a mindfulness practice, so you know that not only does it feel good, but it's actually creating lasting change in your brain and therefore in your life. So as always, I hope this information is beneficial to you, beneficial to your practice, beneficial to your life, and ultimately to the life change that you're wanting to make. I'm going to link a couple of different mindfulness practices just to kind of give you a taste of what those can be like. And definitely hit that subscribe button if you're interested in learning more about the brain, about the body, about how you can create lasting change in your own life. And until next time, take care.